Hey guys, welcome back, it's Meg. I honestly don't know what to call this video because it's kind of a wish list, but also kind of a just for fun brainstorm type of thing. So is this what Mistweaver needs, what I would do if I was a dev for a day or a wish list? I don't really know, but here's some thoughts about the spec. For this video I have major and minor changes, but that isn't meant to convey the impact of the change, but more so how hard I would think it would be to implement the change. So something like a new ability or new talent would be a major change, whereas some of the other things would be easy to implement. Even though they're still impactful, I would consider it a minor change. There's also a few things in here that are just clearly completely overpowered, but it's fun to think about abilities that you could get for a class based on the class fantasy or for the lore surrounding it. So this is 50-50 on changes that would be fun to have versus realistic changes that could be added in a patch or something, and I think it's pretty obvious which ones are which. And this is a Mistweaver video, so there's definitely some things that I didn't include because I think they should be universal per role. So I think all healers should have a B-res, but I've talked about that so much on it that my stance is pretty well known, so I think all healers should have a Brez and all tanks should have some type of group utility, and drums and scrolls should return, but that's not the point of this video so much, so I didn't include those. Starting out with a minor change, this one really should be no surprise. I think I've been talking about this for months at this point, but our healing amps have gotten out of control and has become quite bloated. So my recommendation would be to just remove Enveloping Breath from Celestials and bake that power back into the baseline ability. The cooldown doesn't need to be nerfed, but it's a buff that's easy to prune. And then my second choice for removal would actually be Chi Harmony, and while I do love the ability and what it does for us, I think it's getting in the way of tuning for Vivify and other healing spells since we do have to be tuned with those in mind. Along the same line of healing amps getting in the way of tuning is also Ancient Teachings and Jade Empowerment. Jade Empowerment has gone back and forth with how powerful it is based on target counts, since Ancient Teachings and Jade Empowerment are hard to balance between keys and raid. I would prefer if Jade Empowerment went back to how it was early on this season, where it deals the greatest amount of damage to the primary target, but can also cleave for a lesser amount, as opposed to what we have now where it's very weak on single target. This was a weird change for them to walk back because they'd previously made the change to prevent raid tuning on Jade Empowerment from impacting keys, but then it just kind of got forgotten about and ended up nerfed in both forms of content. In order for Jade Empowerment to be strong in keys and still good in raid but not overpowered, I would like there to be a percent modifier for Ancient Teachings in keys and in raid, since most of keys is still heavily reliant on Ancient Teachings, and you don't want to just be DPSing in raid like we were for Prog in 11.1. Mistweaver is heavily tied to melee, but many fights do have forced downtime, especially during high damage moments, so having Jade Empowerment as a reliable tool to heal outside of melee without having to resort to extremely weak casts like Vivify is really important for the spec health and the viability. Chi Cocoons were nerfed coming into the War Within, which is really sad because it's our only tool to provide group-wide survivability outside of HPS. That's an issue that Mistweaver has faced for a very long time, and by very long time I mean forever. Every now and then there's a Mythic Plus season that is particularly bad about one-shots, and with no tools to prevent these one-shots, Mistweaver caps out pretty quick. I would like to see the Chi Cocoons buff to 18% caster HP since it's also tied to our main cooldown. In addition to this, someone in my chat mentioned that it would be cool if Expel Harm and Thunder Focus Tea provided group-wide Chi Cocoons instead of the self-application, and I do like this idea. It sounds strong, but the HPS is about 2 casts worth of Power Word Shield, so sounds good to me. This would not be a Mistweaver wishlist video if Life Cocoon wasn't brought up. Very similar to Mistweaver's issue with lack of group survivability tools, we lack a legitimate external for tanks. Life Cocoon is in an okay spot to use on ourselves or on DPS, but it is borderline useless for tanks. We currently have 3 modifier talents that make Life Cocoon what it is for Mythic Plus, and it's kind of an embarrassing amount of points to put into one of the worst externals in the game. If I could redesign Life Cocoon, I would remove Mist of Life and Chrysalis from the tree. Mist of Life is okay, but it's not something I'm super attached to. It could be baked in or removed, and I wouldn't have any strong feelings about it. Chrysalis is the cooldown reduction, but I would just bake that cooldown into the spell and make it a 1.5 minute cooldown. As for Calm and Coalescence, this can stay and be a choice node with a talent I came up with called Serpent Safeguard. This would replace Refreshment and allow Life Cocoon to become a DR or a massive shield. Serpent Safeguard would reduce all damage taken by 45% for the duration of the absorb, and if the cocoon breaks before the duration is up, there would be an additional % of damage reduction for an extra 5 seconds. This choice node would then be controlling whether you have a very large absorb with maybe a small amount of DR if they want to bake that in, or no DR and just have it be straight up a big shield, or the choice of a smaller absorb plus a DR and some residual DR after the shield breaks. Another baseline change I would like to see Life Cocoon get is to scale off of my target's health rather than the caster health, and allow the increased hot healing to linger after the cocoon breaks, since there's currently no time for hots to heal when it's on a tank. I don't think Life Cocoon needs all of the changes that I mentioned. Of course, I would prefer the DR portion, but even if we just got target health scaling instead, it would still be a large improvement from what we have now. Sheilun's gift is in kind of a similar boat to Life Cocoon, 3 talents to modify one spell that could use some condensing. I would like to see Legacy of Wisdom baked into Sheilun's baseline. Without it, Sheilun's hits 3 targets and is really inconsistent, so if it were baseline 5, it would make a lot more sense. Since Legacy is a choice node with Emperor's Favor, I would move Emperor's Favor up top to Sheilun's original node and make it a choice node between the single target or the AoE spell. And then we would just have Xiaohao's Lessons and Veil of Pride's choice node right below that as usual. Featherfeet is actually an existing talent. It is a PvP talent, but I think it would be incredible if we could get this as a choice node with Lighter Than Air. Being able to move while casting would be game-changing for Mistweaver as a melee healer with casted and channeled abilities, and I think the choice of the double jump for move casting would be a good trade-off. Okay, this is where things start to get a little unrealistic. I had an idea for a choice node with Ring of Peace to replace Song of Chi-Ji, since Song goes almost entirely unused. With Xiaohao's Final Breath, you become one with your surroundings, creating a dense mist in a 10-yard radius around you for 8 seconds. Enemies and players are unable to target into or out of the mist. This was obviously heavily inspired by Smoke Bomb, but Ring of Peace is a very good ability, so when I was thinking about things that I would replace it with, they needed to be equally as good or provide some type of unique utility to the group. Other things that came to mind were gathering tools like Grabby Hands, Sigil of Chains, and that Pink Tornado is actually something called Chi-Ji's Song, which functions very similarly to Xiaohao's Final Breath, and this ability was used during the Jadefire Masters encounter in Battle for Dazara lore. Of course, the numbers could be adjusted and there would have to be restrictions on lieutenants and bosses not being affected, but because this is on the class tree, having a gathering tool would be helpful for all of the monk specs, especially Brewmaster. Class fantasy-wise, of course, you have the Misty effects from Mistweaver, but in the Pandaria lore and the Burdens of Xiaohao cinematics, Emperor Xiaohao sacrificed himself to protect the island of Pandaria, and that was hidden until we went there in the expansion. Another tool that I would give Ring of Peace up for is some type of skipping tool like Shroud of Concealment or Mind Soothe. This takes similar themes as Xiaohao's Final Breath, but this would work more as a shroud to help groups bypass mobs that you would want to skip. Song of Chi-Ji kind of works this way, and of course there's precedence with Shroud of Concealment, which is why I would find this talent more realistic than Xiaohao's Final Breath, but the idea of being shrouded by a cloud of mist just seems really fitting. Next up is just a bunch of graphical updates or cosmetics. I actually didn't know that the Xiaohao's Lessons buffs had graphics until I started making this video. They show up for just a few seconds at the very bottom of your feet, and it looked so out of place I think it might actually be bugged. There are a ton of hand and body effects that were used in MoP or used in other parts of the game that still fit the theme of each of the lessons. This would be nice just for visual clarity on which buff you have. I'm personally a fan of the full body effects because I think it is super clear, and I think that they're really unique because you don't get a ton of full body effects, but you get a lot of hand effects. There's also a lot of Sha effects that went mostly unused outside of the Mist of Pandaria expansion, and I think they look so cool. It would be nice to get a little bit more mileage out of those. I also really like Glyphs, and I would like those to make a more prominent return. A few months ago, I did a mock-up UI window for what a reworked glyph interface could look like, and I also have a few glyphs that I would like to see in the game. This is of course where I get to talk about the recolors for the Feline Stomp appearance. I loved the visual of the original Feline Stomp, but the colors didn't really say monk. So these I have recolored to match each of these celestials, just like we have for our Crackling Jade Lightning glyph. My personal favorite is Chi-Chi, but you could also swap glyphs out depending on the common colors of the dungeon you're in or the raid that you're in to help with visual clarity. Obviously, I could talk about Monk forever, but these are things that I've had in my head for a while, so I just wanted to get them out there. I had a lot of fun making this video, and I hope you all enjoy it. Thanks for watching.